Although you can create designs right inside of REI Pebble, sometimes you'll want to take it a step further and design it with your own designer. In this video, I'm going to show you how to actually design a postcard or any graphic really with a web application called Canva. It's a free designer that you can use with a lot of functions on the free plan. And of course, they have a pro plan as well. So before we actually dive right into the setup, you see on my screen here the design of the card. But the main thing first is actually setting up the actual document. Before we actually start designing, we actually need to create the design inside of Canva or whatever graphic design program you decide to use. I'm going to go ahead and create a design for our postcards inside of REI Pebble. To do that, I'm going to use custom size, and then it depends on what dimension of the postcards you want to create for. We have a 9x6 and a 4x6 as well. So I'm going to create something for 9x6. I need to make sure that I set this to inches. And I'll go ahead and retype this. Now, the other thing we have to keep in mind is what we call our trim marks. We typically have to design slightly bigger because when they trim it, it will then actually become 9x6. So we actually need to add a 1/4 of an inch on both sides. So on the width, we're going to add 0.25, and the width, we're going to add also 0.25. So that when they trim the 1/4 inch marks, it will then end up being the correct size at 9x6. I'll go ahead and then hit create new design. For the purpose of this video and the tutorial, I've already created the document here. In my design, I want there to be a map where I say, is this your property? Then I'm going to have some placeholder text here created by Pebble. All of these texts here are actually part of the design. I'm not going to actually do that inside of Pebble. The only thing I'm going to do inside of Pebble on this page is to add a bit of text where I am actually offering an amount. And then also I'm going to have the map of that property sit in this area. Now there's a few things you need to keep in mind when designing, and you really have to think in layers. When we're bringing this design in, we're going to also have to merge our actual map or satellite view of the property. So what we're going to do is create this as a top layer for REI Pebble when we import it, and the background will actually be the map. Now you can see here I've got a box here that spans the entire width, and then another white box here. If I double check this, it is white. It is actually not transparent. And some text here, and I've added a doodle line here as well. And I'm going to add an arrow here. I know that the center mark is right around here, so I'm just pointing roughly because it's going to actually show their property right in the middle. The map itself will be set as a placeholder inside of REI Pebble, and that will be part of the background image. So it'll actually be behind all of this. And as you can see, I've got an orange box and a white box. Right here, there is nothing. It is actually completely transparent, so the map will actually show through, sort of like a window. Everything you have around it is like the window's frame. Another thing to keep in mind is your trim marks and your safe zone. Typically, there is going to be a little bit of margin for error. It's not always going to be exactly printed at the exact same spot. So you want to make sure you have a little bit of room from the top and the sides. And that's why you see that I'm pulling this down. This is probably a lot more than I need, but I'm just a little bit paranoid, so I want to make sure I got a little bit of space here because it's going to get cut off by a 1/4 inch on the top and bottom in total. So that's really 1/8 of an inch on the top and 1/8 of an inch on the bottom. This is a little bit tight. I'm not totally comfortable with that. I'm going to actually select these elements here, except for the box, and I'm going to just bring it up just a bit slightly, just to make sure that when things get trimmed, this last line here will not get trimmed. All right, so I am good to bring this into now REI Pebble. I've got my text that isn't going to change. All of this is going to be static text. Anything else I'm going to add, I'll just add it inside of Pebble, which is the background image, and some text above here, which is going to be dynamic information because my offer price here will change dynamically. Same with the map. The map will be every single property that I'm mailing out to. They're going to have their own map image here, which is going to be dynamic, and Pebble is going to handle that. All right, now when we're exporting this file, we're just going to simply hit download. One of the key things is the dimensions. It's already locked in for you. The other main thing is to make sure that it is PNG. That's because a PNG will allow for transparency. Now, on my free Canva plan here, I do not have the ability to download with a transparent background, but you can always download it under their free trial, which you can simply upgrade here to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and download this with the transparent background, and then now I'll import it right into REI Pebble. All right, so now that we have our artwork in a PNG format with a transparent background, I'm going to now show you how to actually create your postcard using REI Pebble's document editor and also place in the dynamic information, or what we call our placeholders, so that every mailer will look different. Now, this doesn't matter if you're doing neighbor letters or neighbor postcards, or you're adding artwork to something else like a letter. The principles are still the same. I'm just using a postcard as an example to show you how to bring artwork from a different place into REI Pebble. All right, so I'm going to go into settings right now. And I'm actually going to create and add a new template. Now, on your version, you're going to be able to create blank documents. What I'm going to do, you may have a blank postcard template. I don't on my account here because this is a staging account. I'm just going to select an existing 6x9 and just delete everything off there and use that. So if you have a blank template that you can add from our template library, go ahead and choose the 6x9 if you're following along with this example, or whatever other format you want to do. If it's 4x6, then make sure you do it by 4x6. Just keep in mind, we talked about the extra spacing you need, the 1/8 of an inch on both sides, so 1/4 of an inch total. So my document is actually 6.25 and 9.25. Now I'm just going to go ahead and actually delete everything off here. I'm just going to use the coding here to do that. And we're only going to use the one side. It's the same principle if you're doing the back side. So here is our artboard. Now, as we were talking about earlier, the trim side. This is where the trim side, sorry, the blue line is where the printers are actually going to cut off. In order to print color right to the edge or a design right up to the edge, they don't actually have a printer that goes exactly to the end of the actual sheet. They actually print more than that and then trim it. And that's why when we were designing it in Canva, I told you that you do need that extra space. That's why it's 9.25 inches wide and 6.25 inches tall or in height, so that we have that 1/4 of an inch that will be cut off in total on both sides. All right, so the first thing we're going to do in our head, we know how it's going to look like. We know it's going to be, there's going to be some dynamic information. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is actually drop the artwork in and set it as a background. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and hit the little art insert image button here. I'm going to go ahead and upload my image. All right, so I've dragged in my artwork here, and it asks me for the width and height. I really don't care because I don't know the exact. It really depends on the pixel density of your image and all these things. I would just make sure it's large, and then we can just shrink it when we add it onto our board just manually. Okay, that's the best way. That's the best thing I would suggest to do, rather than trying to figure out what is the exact pixel. Even though I give you the numbers, it will not be the same because it depends on the artwork's setting. What is the amount of pixel per inch? So it gets really confusing. I'm just going to set it as 2000 right now. I know the proportions are going to be right because I set it for 6.25 high and then 9.25 wide. So that's the main thing you do need to do. I'm going to actually set a class for this and create this as a background. If I don't create this as a background, then it wouldn't be something that I can type on top of. So we do need to set the class as background. I'm going to align it to the left. So I'll go ahead and hit save here. Now you can see this is way, way too big, right? So it obviously needs to be a lot smaller. I'm going to go to edit image here. Sorry, I apologize. I'm going to go right click and go to image here. I'm just going to shrink it to quite small, and I'll sort of stretch it out. Then it's easier. What I'm going to do is now stretch it out. So I'm going to hold shift so it locks it, and then I'm just going to drag it out right until that size. And there you go. It is the size I want it to be. Now you can see everything, all my text fits within the trim size, and the safe zone is a recommended zone to make sure your texts are within there. Now there's a couple things though. First of all, I want to make sure there's going to be an actual map that will show up in the background. So in order to do that, I actually need to set that as the background. So you got to think of everything in layers. The map is going to be on the bottom. Then this artwork is almost like a window frame that is going to sit above that. And then text is going to be on top of that I'm going to manually type in. So I'm going to actually undo everything. First of all, I'm going to add my placeholder, and this is going to throw everything off. So I'm going to add my property map placeholder. I'm going to stretch it as wide as I can. All right, now I'm also going to go image here and set the class as a background as well, and it's going to be aligned left. All right, I'm just going to fill the window. It's fine. The bottom will get cut off. Not a big deal. So I know the center is there. Now I'm going to add another background that's going to sit on top of this. So I'll go add my original image that I dragged in. I wanted to show you what I meant before I actually did this correctly. So here is the image. I'm also going to set this as a background. All right, so again, I've added the background image first, which was the placeholder for the map, and then I've added the actual postcard on top of that, and I stretched it to fit the size manually. So I just want to make sure that I have this actually going right up to the edge of that artboard. All right, and you can see that that looks all good now. You can see the trim mark is going to be where that blue line is, and my arrow, points roughly to where that property is. So I'm actually, before I do anything, I'm going to save this. I'm going to rename this first. I'm going to call this map background postcard 6x9, and I'm just going to put dash Canva example. Now again, you don't need to use Canva for this. You can use Illustrator or whatever other software you want to. Canva just happens to be a really easy to use system to design things. I wouldn't say REI Pebble is the best piece of software to design something, but it is, you're not going to be able to do full-on graphic designs sort of like Canva, and that's exactly what Canva's for. So you can see here, if I zoom out, everything is looking good. I've got everything fitting in here. My arrow's pointing there. Now all I just want to add here at the top is this your property? And then I would like to offer, let's say, a range there. So easy enough. I'm going to go ahead and just start typing. I'd like to, now, actually, before we do that, we should probably approach this in a few different ways. I actually like to use tables to set the text up. You don't need to, but for one line, for a couple lines, you may want to do that. For one line, it's not a big deal. I mean, if I use tables here, let's just use that so I can add more cells later. A couple things I need to do is table properties. The border width is going to be 0 because I don't want any lines to show up. All right, let's see how that looks. Cool. All right, and then the next thing I want to do is write in my information. I'd like to offer, let's say, a range, right? 2,500 to 5,500 or something like that. So I need to use a couple placeholders, and the placeholders I'm going to use are really for my ranged offers. So I've got an offer price here. I think I've got a lower limit and upper limit range here as an example. Let's just see if I can find that. Okay, so it looks like I don't have the actual placeholders. I'm going to actually do that right now. I'm just going to hit into a new window here, go to settings, and I'm going to go to my property fields to actually create those fields. I'll put them inside of details here. Oops. We'll go lower limit range. This is a ranged offer. You don't have to do it this way. It could be a blind offer, so you're just going to use the offer price. And then upper limit range. I'm going to set those as currency, so it'll generate the $sign for it as well. Great. So when I upload my list, I just need to make sure that I have a column for my lower limit and my upper limit, and I'll just add it to these columns. If you want to learn more about ranged offers, there is a great video in our knowledge base about ranged offers. So I'm going to go ahead and come back to this. I'm going to actually save this first of all, and then give it a refresh so I have the new placeholders. So I'd like to offer, I'm going to go under details. Here we go. Lower limit range to what's the upper limit range here? And obviously we haven't designed it to look nice just yet, but we're going to do that in a second. And my upper limit, so it could say something like I like to offer 2,000 to 5,000 for it. All right, so I'm going to actually go ahead and come back to the table here. And the reason, again, if I wanted more details, and I want to hop around the screen and have sort of text all over the place. Tables are great. You don't need to. I could have just entered and line spaced all the way to here and then just write it, because I've only got one line I'm going to write. But I just wanted to show you. I'm going to center everything. So it's not exactly centering to the table. What I need to do is, and I will let you know I'm not an expert in our editor. So alignment is center here. I think it's cell alignment. Cell properties, here we go. Horizontally, we want to be centered. Vertically, we can right center or middle as well. So there we go. That's what this is looking good. Now I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter here. All right. I'm going to then go ahead and increase the font size because it's a little bit small, and I'm going to change the font style. We've got a couple handwritten ones here. I don't know. We'll just use this one here. All right, and then I'm going to make this white. So I will go to here because I want it to show up. I'm gonna also bold this a little bit. Now, it's actually not going to be in 2 lines. It's just that this placeholder is so long, it's going to shift it to 2 lines. But watch this. I'm going to save it first. I'm going to hit preview. And it's going to generate me a live proof here, an example proof. And it doesn't have a data set, so I'll put in 5,000 for that, and then 10,000. And then I'll update the preview here. Now, I probably want that to be a little bit larger. Oops, I forgot to add the dollar signs here. So when you import, it should have that dollar sign. But for this example, because we're just manually typing these in, it's not going to show up. I'm going to hit update. All right, this is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you have a better view. The bottom is, I haven't done anything to it. So you can see now it says, is this your property? I'd like to offer 5,000 to 10,000 for it. And then I'm actually very interested in buying your property for cash. Submit your property, submit your land at whatever.com. Now I might have the property code too if I wanted to add that. For this example, I'm not going to, in terms of time's sake here. I'm going to actually increase a little bit, but you see how that sort of shifted it down a little bit. What I can do is, you can play with a few things, and I'd suggest you, because there's so many different ways you can do this. It sort of like makes it really impossible for me to tell you exactly what to do. So I'm going to try this. It's a little bit on the large size, so maybe I want to try size 24. And then I'm going to hit preview again and see how this looks. Now, again, it's shifted down to a second line because these placeholders are just so darn long. But when you're actually entering $1 in there, like this, oops, I don't think you'll have a range that large. It would essentially look like this. And if you want to change the font size further, you can absolutely do so. And I'm going to zoom out here. This is looking pretty good. I mean, heck, I may want to increase that font size a little bit more to my liking. Maybe, the next size up. Or if I know a little bit of coding, I can just come into the coding here, find where 24 is. There it is. Then I can maybe change it to like 32 or something along those lines. And there you go. I'm going to go ahead and save changes. So a few things to recap is when you're creating your artwork, make sure you're using the right size. Always add 1/4 of an inch to the top and to the sides and the top. On the width and the length of the artboard. That way you have the right area to get trimming. Make sure you have transparency if you want something transparent like a property map to show up. The other thing is really sort of, maybe you want to sketch this out on a piece of paper before you actually design it so you know the direction. And then when you're importing it, make sure you do it in the right order. You want to do whatever is on the lowest level or layer first. So I did my property map first, and then I did the postcard on top of that, which is like sort of the window frame you can think of. And then everything else, all my text is going to sit at the very top, right? You do want that to be seen. That's the most important, right? So, and then do note that the placeholders sometimes do get very lengthy and looks like it shifts everything, but it won't. So again, this is how you sort of go about it. So I'm going to just type this in here. And then update the preview. Always preview your artwork when you're working on this. And other than that, that's pretty much ready to go. That's how you bring artwork on. Canva is a great program to do your actual graphic designing. You can have somebody work on there as well. Just make sure you're able to export with transparency. I think it's totally worth paying the pro for that. It's a very, very affordable piece of software if you're going to be creating. Or heck, you could just create an account just to create one. You have a 7-day trial and open up another account if needed. Aside from that, that's how you create a postcard or any artwork from an external designer and bring it in to REI Pebble. As an example, showing you how I used Canva to build this postcard design with arranged offer.